With the PlayStation Classic announced, Sony follows Nintendo with their NES and SNES Classic Mini, which both sold amazingly well. I thought this would be a good time to share my views on these mini systems, and I wonder what you think as well, so let me know. Like the NES and SNES Classic Mini, the PlayStation Classic will obviously run on emulation. Some people hate this idea, but to be against emulation sounds silly to me. Not only do we need good emulators for game preservation, because your awesome retro hardware isn't made to last forever, most consoles with any kind of backwards compatibility run emulators to do the job. The PS4 and Vita can run a number of PS1 games, but do not have original PlayStation 1 hardware like the PS2 and the early PS3 had, so the games have to be emulated. The same thing is true for those classic compilation discs or the Virtual Console on Nintendo's previous systems. Anyone is right to say emulation is never 100% accurate, but that's also true for Sony and Nintendo branded software, unless the games were optimized or remastered for the new hardware, which is a tough and expensive job, and definitely not the case for the NES and SNES Mini. Nintendo's mini consoles run on an off-the-shelf quad-core Linux computer with 256 MB of RAM and 512 MB of flash memory for storage. That storage contains ROMs and a custom build of Linux. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's the cheapest and probably the best way to release these systems. But you know where this is going, right? You can play games for all of these consoles on any machine that runs a custom build of Linux. Popular ways to go are an Android TV box, a GPD XD or an old laptop for instance. Most people use a $30 Raspberry Pi with RetroPie, which, if you follow the right instructions, is incredibly easy to set up and emulate NES, SNES and PS1 games, just as good as any modern console. And since many people end up hacking their NES and SNES Mini to play more games, why not use a Raspberry Pi if you'll end up going through all the effort of customizing your own system anyway? Well, I think there are at least 3 good reasons. The mini consoles run out of a box, so it makes a perfect gift. It looks cool and it is collectible, and it's an official product with licensed games. And to be honest, I'm not really going to argue with that. The classic minis are ready to play and make perfect gifts. Yes, we now have third-party cases for the Raspberry Pi that look quite similar. They are nice, but not quite the same thing, and you'll still have to assemble those. I'm not going to go deep into the legal part. I personally consider emulating games you physically own and dumped yourself fair use. Most judges will agree, Nintendo does not. It's a grey area. For the PS1 this is even harder, because the emulator needs BIOS files, which are copyrighted by Sony. Unless you have the tools and skills to dump those files from your own hardware, obtaining them is illegal in most countries. Now, legality and ethics don't always go hand in hand. Playing games that could otherwise never be played because they aren't distributed anymore sounds fine to me. If you buy those games at second-hand shops, Nintendo won't make any money off it either, nor will the original developers. Is it legal to get the ROM online or from a friend? Probably not. But is it ethical? Well, judge yourself. But I digress. As things are today, irrefutably, if you don't own the games, these unhacked official mini consoles are legal. And a custom system with ROMs that aren't licensed for it is not in most countries. Or in other words, until now there wasn't really a way to play any of these titles legally on a tiny device in your living room without owning an official console with the games. Unless you count the awesome but poorly marketed PlayStation TV. I don't mind Sony or Nintendo making money off these mini systems. Rather, it shows those companies are aware of the demand for their legacy software, and the better they sell, the more it will force them to continue the support. Because backwards compatibility isn't as easy and common as it used to be. At the same time, as a reaction to the booming sales of nostalgia hardware and games, Nintendo has started attacking ROM sites that freely distribute their old titles, which is sort of understandable, but probably not the way to go. We need to preserve games that are otherwise unobtainable, and we need a great retro emulation scene to keep those games alive and running almost perfectly. And that will be all for this video. What do you think of these classic mini systems? Will you get one this holiday season, or are you going to stick with other ways to play your old games? Either way, thank you for watching and have an awesome day. Cheers!